Good morning. It's a Wednesday morning. We got rain outside. It's going to be a very, very damp, sort of gray kind of a day. And matter of fact, yesterday, that's a lot like what the markets really looked like. The markets had a little bit of pressure on them after that great run up that we had on Monday. A little bit of easing back and a little bit of pulling back. It's kind of the into the news. You want to be owning something. And as the news is delivered, it seems like oftentimes we talk about this where it really has to impress or the disappointment levels. And I'll give you a great example of that. Obviously, Apple. Apple was up 6% on Monday. And then you come back yesterday, you go to the launch, everybody's excited about everything, and Apple's not really participating. Amazon, same sort of story, an unbelievable run up to Prime Day. And then that pullback. And then, of course, we've got earnings season that's been kicking off, and we've gotten those financials, and we've got the start of those financials yesterday. We also had some news with Disney, but there was more disappointments yesterday. That's why the Dow finished down about 150 points. The Nasdaq down small, very, very small, 12 points, out meaningless. S&P down about 22 points. We did have some good volumes yesterday, traded about 28 million contracts once again with a volatility index that was rising. Makes a little bit of sense. We were getting pushed to the downside, a pretty decent push to the downside. So a lot of folks kind of getting a little bit nervous maybe, and suddenly you've got the VIX trading around 26. Nothing to be panicked about, not even a huge move to the upside, but nonetheless up yesterday towards that 26 level. So we're getting a little bit deeper into earnings season. How was some of the reaction? Well, we know that JP Morgan crushed it yesterday, right? The numbers were outstanding. The trading numbers, the revenue numbers off of that. Citi, same sort of story. They didn't have as many problems, obviously, as we started to dig deeper into the earnings in terms of loan losses. Yet, so JP Morgan finished down about 1.6%. Take a look at Citi, down nearly 5%. It's a lot of the reason why I jumped out of that name like a month or so ago because of the disappointment. It just has not delivered. And maybe that starts at the very top. And maybe when we see some of those changes, we had Mike Mayo on yesterday who said, let's accelerate those changes. Well, we'll see some of those changes as we get into 2021. But nonetheless, I understand what Mike's talking about because there is disappointment. There is all of the what lines up to be things that should be working well right now for Citi, and it's just not happening. So that's something that as we get into the earnings today and a little bit more on the financials, you've got Goldman Sachs, you've got Wells Fargo, you've got Bank of America. We'll dig a little bit deeper into that, but a lot of shifting around. And as I say, you buy into the news, and then you oftentimes want to sell when the news is getting delivered. So we had some weaknesses yesterday, and what I guess you could put in the category of the shutdown type stocks. You've got cruise ships, you've got hotels, you've got casinos. Take a look yesterday when you look at Wynn, MGM, Las Vegas Sands, and of course when you get back over towards the cruise ships, down pretty hard. Matter of fact, Royal Caribbean yesterday down about 13%. So really getting punished yesterday. Did have some strength in other places. Again, sort of the lockdowns though. Netflix, Zoom, PayPal, Lulu. So you get the idea of where some of the shifting was happening yesterday in terms of the areas to maybe worry about, but also some of the areas that potentially would prosper once again, and that would be obviously with some sort of a shutdown, some of those names that I just mentioned just there. XLF clinging towards that 25. It was down about 2% yesterday. We had the industrials with some pressure yesterday. Semiconductors, not so much. They were down a little bit, but so small, not even really worth mentioning. And then you've got Disney. And Disney did have that big spike. The streaming story and the focus on streaming, stock pushing around near that 130 level, it seemed like all day long. We did have some activity in there as well that we talked about yesterday here on the take. So that was something that did play out pretty nicely. We've had the yin and the yang today. We had markets that were sort of shifting around downside, upside, and almost searching for clarity. Well, we did, as I say, get some of the numbers. The numbers today a little bit different from the financials. You look at Goldman Sachs, absolutely crushed it, knocked it out of the ballpark, and that was pretty impressive. I'm not so sure that you can say the same for Bank of America and some of the other names, Wells Fargo, and those names under a little bit of pressure. So another one that actually was at least moving to the upside nicely, US Bank up about 2% this morning. Oil also up close to 2% today. We're pushing back. We talked about losing that 40 level, and here we are now pushing on 41. That's given the energy space a lot of room to the run to the upside. Names like Concho and Diamondback and Apache and Devon and Pioneer, all those names moving to the upside. Those on the beta side, you also having a lot of those big cap names as well moving to the upside. So as we see oil moving around and shifting around, it seems like the want is for oil to be something north of 40 for sure for many of these companies. And we've been watching that as that's been trading around too. So we've got oil right in that 40 range. You've got the XLF right around that 25 range. So it seems like we found a lot of different areas where people are feeling more comfortable, and it doesn't seem to, it seems like buys underneath those levels. Maybe it seems like some sells above those levels, unless we're talking about technology or semiconductors, where it seems like day in and day out, for the most part, had a little pullback yesterday, for the most part, have been running to the upside. And you could throw in a couple other areas as well. Industrials today, some modest gains there. You look over at Honeywell and Boeing and 3M. Financials, as I mentioned, Goldman Sachs, but also JP Morgan getting a bounce back. Now, yesterday, JP Morgan did start in positive territory and then just sort of bled off as the day went on in terms of where that stock price was. But American Express as well looks pretty strong today. We've got some great NASDAQ leaders, big cap names. We got Netflix and Tesla, Qualcomm, Lam Research, Intel, Autodesk, Apple, Baidu. A nice broad move in terms of some of the names that are leading in the NASDAQ right now. So yesterday, I got to point this out. So we talk about the unusual options all the time. Follow the smart money. That's the name of the book. It's what we believe in, and we are always trying to follow that. Well, yesterday, 2 times yesterday in NEO. So obviously going back to the EV side of things in terms of China in this particular case, explosive move today. Stocks up 15%, but might have gotten a little bit of push yesterday because NEO, we had two different buyers. One sort of in the early, but just after the open, but the early parts of the morning. Another one later in the afternoon. They were buying the November 21 strike calls. They were also buying the November 21 strike calls that expire on the 13th in November. Well, stock was trading around 21 and a quarter at the time, so these were right at the money, just barely in the money calls. Stock today is at 25. I think those calls are doing pretty good. It's just amazing, and we had some decent size there. So that's something that we talk about all the time, just these quick moves to the upside, and it's amazing. And I'll tell you what, that's where discipline kicks in. If you were with one of our coaches here, if you're asking opinions of me or anybody else, we'd say, hey, look, discipline dictates action, DDA. We talk about it all the time. Why do we say that? Because you got to take some of that off. Doesn't mean you sell the whole thing, but you maybe take a little bit of trimming, because that is a really swift move in just a few hours when you really break it down. So amazing. So today, some more unusual option activity for you. DuPont. Talk about materials all the time. We've been very excited about these materials. Seen a lot of option activity across the board. Freeport Mac, a lot of these Dow. Yeah, I mean, go through the list and you will find all kinds of different names that have been hitting of late, specifically on the unusual option activities. Today it's DuPont. Very early, that was one of the names that hit. Stock was trading underneath 58, call it 57.85. They're buying the 58.50 calls that expire Friday. Today's Wednesday, hump day. So Friday, this has today, Thursday, Friday to produce. They are just barely out of the money calls. They're only going for about 60 cents. So risk reward, this also is a somewhat favorable trade as well. So that's some of the things that we look at. People ask all the time, well, what determines whether or not you actually do the trade or don't do the trade? All kinds of things go into that, quite frankly. But one of them is, do we like what we are seeing in terms of the risk that you're taking for the potential reward? And in this case, stock has to make just a minimal move really to the upside to get these options to start to work. So that is why I selected this one today for unusual option activity for everybody. So get educated, understand. We talk about it all the time. Knowledge is king. That's why you've got to have understanding and knowledge that goes into what we talk about each and every day here on The Take. Now, The Take has been something that's been really fun. We continue to do it. I will continue to do it. Obviously, it's great. But try to learn from this as much as you can. And as you're learning, maybe read books. Doesn't have to be our book, but understand what's going on in this derivatives world, because this is where the growth is. This is the place to be in terms of where the markets are shifting towards. And tell you what, we talk about growth all the time. We talk about it in stocks. We talk about it in all kinds of different areas. But this is where the growth is in the markets themselves. And that's absolutely in the derivatives markets. Folks, have a great day of trading. Best of luck to you, and we'll see you tomorrow.